Hello, everybody. Delighted to be here to talk to you today about modernizing Microsoft's internal engineering practices. We join you from the Great Northwest in Redmond, Seattle, and we are from the Core Services Engineering and Operations Group. This is essentially Microsoft IT group. We create and build everything that Microsoft runs on. And today we're going to talk to you about modernizing practices, dealing with our technical debt, how we emphasize developer productivity using tools like Azure DevOps and application insights. But first, let's meet the team. So my name is Mary McHale. I'm Principal Group Program Manager in Microsoft, and I worked on the Modern Engineering Vision about 3 years ago that led us to the path that we're on now, and delighted to talk to you about that. So over to you, Martin.
Hey everybody, my name is Martin O'Flaherty and I'm a Principal PM Lead also within Core Services Engineering and Operations. My team primarily focuses on engineering productivity, developer productivity. So I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you all and help answer some of your questions. So with that, I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Ashim.
You're muted.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ashim Jaidka, and I'm a Principal PM, and I work in the same group as Mary and Martin. I'll be managing questions, the Q&A today, so I'll be staying in the background for the most part. And with that, I'd like to hand it off to Cindy.
Hello, I'm Cindy Coloma, and I am the Employee and Executive Communications Manager for the Core Platform team at Microsoft, and I will be your moderator today. And with that, back to Mary.
Thank you, Cindy. And so just to give you an idea what you can expect in the next half hour, we're going to talk to you about our modern engineering journey. We're going to talk about the tools that we've used. We're happy to talk about the challenges that we've hit and really talk about the journey where we mirror the excellence that we have in our product groups. But first, let's talk about how you can engage. So you can drop your questions into the chat box. You can post anonymously, or you can use your name. Questions will appear to all once they're approved. You can upvote your favorite questions. We will have experts answer them verbally or in the chat, and we'll try and answer the most popular questions first. A little bit about etiquette. We ask that you do not record or photograph this session or post anything on social media. Microsoft may use this recording for internal use, and please help our moderators by not spamming them on the chat. I want to draw your attention to the Microsoft Code of Conduct before we get started. The Code of Conduct essentially asks that you help us create a respectful, friendly, fun and inclusive experience for all our participants. Again, it emphasizes that we do not want photography, video or recording of the session or presentations in any format shared on channels. And so now we move on to what you can expect in the Q&A. So we're highlighting some areas that may be of interest to you that you might like to ask us questions about. First of all, very popular with many of the customers we talk to is our move to the cloud and how we tackled optimization once we actually moved to the cloud. You know, then we can spend a fair bit of time talking about technical debt. First of all, how to recognize it, and then how to actually prioritize it. And specifically in our space, we recognize we were carrying a lot of security and compliance debt. And then in terms of the toolings that we use and the practices that we use, we have experts on Azure DevOps, how we implemented the DevOps practices within the organization, and then how over time we progressed to be more customer focused and what we call customer driven development. And last but not least, we're very proud of the life site first culture that we've created. And essentially, this is all about how we surface the right signals to our developers or engineers so that they can best serve our users, and what type of culture is needed to do that, and what types of metrics we look at to help drive excellence in that area. And so without further ado, I think we can switch over to the Q&A.
Great, we have a number of questions coming in, but first I'm going to start with this one for Martin. Can you talk about your use of Azure DevOps in modern engineering and how it's helped in this journey?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, Azure DevOps for us is, I guess, the center of our engineering system. And as the core services and engineering and operations organization, we basically manage a large portfolio of applications and services, about 700 to 800, in fact, to keep Microsoft as an enterprise running. We made a decision when we onboarded to Azure DevOps a number of years ago to centralize all of the development of those services into a single Azure DevOps account. And we also took the effort of making sure that the area path structure in Azure DevOps mimicked the hierarchy of those services. So all the corporate function services for finance, HR, legal, all set together versus the sales, marketing, supply chain services all set together. By structuring our applications based on our hierarchy and then using Azure DevOps, we were able to basically drive end-to-end accountability when something went wrong with those services. And what I mean by that is we would structure our area paths, then every service would have an Azure DevOps team associated to it. The developers would have their code repos aligned with those teams. So now you have code repo to team to service level area path to service level owner. And that was extremely powerful for us. So when there is an incident with a server or with a service or with one of our applications, we immediately know, okay, it's this service has the problem. We know who the owner is. We know in Azure DevOps where the team is, and we know where the code repos are. So that allowed us really to expedite our incident management and our ability to get our services back online as quick as possible, and I guess limit the disruption to our users. So that was one of the key things that we did, is really keeping that hard structure in place in Azure DevOps.
Excellent. Thank you, Martin. Mary, this one's for you. It's one thing to lead the journey technologically, but it's another to change people's mindsets, especially if people have been working the same way for years. How have you successfully transformed the culture to drive these changes?
Thank you, Cindy. I think we all know that driving cultural change, there's many aspects to it, and there's many levers that we have at our fingertips. I think one thing that helped us was our move to the cloud. That changed types of roles that we had in the organization. And from that, it opened up an element of change and excitement about what was possible in the cloud, and some exciting new technologies. From the move to the cloud, the next thing that we actually started to look at is how do we lay out a strong vision for the organization. And often people, if they know where we're looking for them to go, they are happy to invest in their skills and in understanding the processes that we're driving for. And so laying out a vision supported by the types of metrics that we wanted to drive, measuring those metrics, and basically having the exec sponsorship to actually revisit those metrics and see how we're doing. We revisited those metrics on a bi-weekly basis with our leadership team. And I think that actually helped solidify the cultural change, and also help the team understand what we were looking for. Well, of course, we have our reference teams in the product group as well. And as we advanced through our vision, they were not only a reference group, we actually were jointly influencing the overall engineering system in Microsoft, and getting our needs put in there, and co-developing on the engineering system to improve it, and improving the commercial products such as Azure DevOps from being our first and best customer on our own technology. And so it became a very easy change in one respect, because there was a lot of excitement about the technology and the Azure DevOps, or the DevOps practices that we wanted to introduce in the organization. Martin, would you like to add anything there?
Yeah, I suppose that's, I mean, you covered most of it, Mary, but one thing I would like to sort of add, I guess, because you talked a lot about the tools and the processes to change our culture. And I think another big part is the actual people. And sometimes, you know, that's the harder thing to change, or to change people's mindset. So one of the things we really wanted to focus on, and I think Mary mentioned this in her intro, was the sort of live site culture and the blameless culture. You know, incidents happen, software falters, services go down. And, you know, we really had to drive a culture within core services engineering to say, you know what, when an incident happens, that's okay. Not only is it okay, but we really need to embrace that. We call it embrace the red. So when you're red on a dashboard, that's not a bad thing. In fact, when someone is red on a dashboard, when an incident fails, that's a fantastic opportunity to learn, essentially. So, you know, we acknowledge the incident and we recover as soon as possible, but then we run a post-mortem afterwards, and we basically, I guess, tease out, okay, why did this happen? How did this happen? How could we engineer out of this? Sharing those learnings across the hundreds of other engineering teams that run our services, you know, really helped us to sort of build a more resilient experience for our customers. Now, we obviously needed leadership buy-in and leadership sponsorship for that, because it really meant, you know, and we had a very strong mantra on that, you know, when a service goes down, that's absolutely okay. Now let's pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, let's learn from it, and let's all do better. So I think driving that culture took a long time, frankly. You know, and we're still, you know, we still work on that, and we still drive that message to our engineering teams that, you know, it's okay to fail fast, get back on your feet.
Great, thank you, Martin. I believe this question is also for you, Martin. How do you balance security versus developer productivity? For example, avoiding slowing down unnecessarily the laptop or desktop due to aggressive security monitoring and policies.
Yeah, that's a really great question, and frankly, it is a constant struggle for us. We have a lot of compliance checks that we do, and that's not only security, it's privacy, it's accessibility. So we basically established a group within core services engineering that essentially, you know, looks at the policies and prioritizes the metrics. We really want to make sure that the engineers are given the time to better their products, but also doing all of the mandatory sort of security checks that they need to do. There is a certain acceptance as well then, that when engineers are prioritizing their work, or, you know, doing our quarterly planning or our sprint planning, that we're actually buffering time in for them to look after that sort of work, you know, and we buffer maybe 30–40% of our engineers' time at certain points of the year, you know, when there's a lot of this sort of checks that needs to get done. So frankly, you know, it is a constant balance to stay secure without, you know, completely, I guess, tanking the engineers' productivity. Mary, do you have anything else to add on how we do that?
Yeah, thank you, Martin. We actually have a phrase now in our build pipeline, what we call safe velocity. And so safe velocity is our mantra. It's like, how do we actually get capability faster to our users while doing it safely? And so Azure DevOps certainly helps us in terms of the gates that we can put in. We're trying to make as many of them automatic gates. And so we're trying to basically reduce all the manual toil that takes you from right up into a release and a deployment. And so with that, we have put in some policies like checking for passwords and code as a simple example at a pull request time. Not leaving that late in what we're finding is the later you leave it in the development cycle, the more expensive it is to actually deal with the problem. And so traditionally what has happened is that the debt on security has built up post deployment. Now what we're saying is we move that closer to the developer at development time and trying to move as many of the tools that we can into the IDE to actually support the developer in real time. Surface as many of I call them signals, but to surface as many of the issues even before the pull request. So it's building that intelligence into the overall system. I wouldn't say that we're there. And there's one of the challenges is that security and compliance is evolving all the time. So while we actually address part of it further up in the pipeline, we still have stuff that will debt that can creep in where new policies arrive and the tooling doesn't deal with that. But in terms of it, most of our policies are all they don't sit on paper, they're automatic. We build as many of them into the pipeline, into the workflow of the engineer. But as Martin has said, that is a tension, it's a constant tension to try and hit the balance between getting delivery faster to our users, but also ensuring that we're compliant, we're compliant in security, in privacy, but also in accessibility. I hope that is helpful to our audience.
Yeah, that was great, Mary. I'll probably start this one with you, Mary, as well. How is the code review process? This was upvoted quite a bit.
Yes, so again, it's this idea of safe velocity and how do we actually move things quickly. One big change that we made very early on, there was actually three big changes we made very early on. One was around patching, 100% patched, and you get that done in a matter of hours. The other one was passwords and code, and the third one was code reviews. And so on the code reviews, we introduced a policy of having within Azure DevOps, where you needed 2 code reviewers to review any of the user check-in or any of the developer check-ins. Some context here. When we started on this journey, we had 70% vendors working on our code for our solutions for corporate functions, and so and that oversight wasn't always there from a full-time employee perspective. But a number of us had come from the product team when we were used to doing code reviews, having joint code reviews, and so we implemented that policy very early on that 2 people had to review the code, both from vendor submission and an FTE submission before it could actually be go into the branch. And so code reviewing is actually now part and parcel of the culture. We have lots of new developers that arrive in, university recruits, and it's actually a way of also building up the capability of all of the engineers, but certainly the people coming in at entry level to developer. So it's a huge part of our process now, and it's actually a very natural thing, and it's like, I think you've already seen some demos this week where they would do code reviews on your mobile phone, or your cell phone. It's kind of a popular way. You don't have to be sitting at your desktop to actually clear the pull request. Martin, is there anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, so you've pretty much covered it all, but just to go back to the Azure DevOps thing then, so we did I mentioned earlier how we centralized on Azure DevOps, and that did allow us as well to basically push these policies out there, and code reviewing was one of the first ones that we did. We have 3,000 developers in our organization, so we have about 6,000 code repos. So by extending Azure DevOps, I guess, and being centralized, we were able to put that as one of our policies to say, so all repos in CSEO needs a mandatory 2 code reviewers, and teams can choose to change that. They can increase that if they wish. If you want to have someone approved to do force push, we can essentially allow that as well at a policy level. So yeah, so I think everything Mary said makes sense. It's just that I wanted to really highlight that being centralized on Azure DevOps did allow us then to push a simple policy like that for code reviewing.
Great, thank you, Martin. Mary, this one back to you. How do you see the acquisition of GitHub working with Azure DevOps over time? Do you see them coming together as a common tool set?
Thank you, Cindy. I was smiling as that question came in. We are super excited about GitHub. Prior to the acquisition of GitHub, actually Martin and I worked on some GitHub projects. So we were familiar with the technology and very excited about it. But as it turns out, we are actively planning projects on GitHub. We want to run Microsoft on GitHub. And so we are in the midst of some pilot projects to taking some of our current services and moving them to GitHub and working out how will ADO and GitHub work in unison. It is very early days. It's fair to say we literally started that work this quarter. But the exciting part of this is we want to be able to. We've a lot of ambition in this space. First of all, we want to be able to help with tooling to help customers migrate if they're interested in going to GitHub Enterprise, and we also want to write some papers about how we tackled that problem, and we want to have them out early next year. So we're and then we're also getting excited about open sourcing some of the code that we have around our systems, and so there's a lot of energy in this space. But as I say, we're still ironing out the kinks in terms of ADO and GitHub and what will work and what won't. You know, we're finding out some of the tooling that we have even around our security area, our security scanning, don't work right now. But you know, because it's such early days, that's the type of thing we want to. We want to have all the tooling we run internally running on GitHub as well for our external customers, and that's the type of you know, that's the type of work we're doing right now. And so watch the space is what I say on that one.
Great. This is a bit of a follow-up question, so I'll stay with Mary for just a moment. But the question, and it was upvoted, was, do you publish documentation about your engineering practices based on your experience? What works and what does not work?
Thank you, Cindy. Again, I want to do more of this. In short, we have a couple of papers published. One of them around, and there will be some links at the very end that we post in the chat. But we have published an external paper on the modernizing journey and the vision. So if anybody is interested in, first of all, following our journey, but also if they're interested in, well, what does a vision paper look like? We've pretty much took what we had and without a whole lot of edits, externalized that. We also want, as a team, to do a lot more blogging about very, very specific parts of that journey. We do some customer engagements for sure. We're in high demand since we published our paper in December, but we want to do more of that. So I have a lot of ambition around covering more around how we do our monitoring, our telemetry, how we run live site. These are all things our customers are interested in. In any of the customer interactions we're starting to understand, people want to understand, how did you decide your first metrics? What did you use to display those metrics? You know, what kind of targets were you setting? And, you know, even how did you get about mobilizing to agree what that first set, it's like, how do you get started initially? And so, yes, I think this is another watch your space where we have a lot of energy in the team about telling the story and helping our customers along this journey. So yes, absolutely, more to come here.
Great. So next, this one is for Martin. what branching strategy do you use?
So we have some standards across CSEO for branching strategies, and we sort of leave flexibility within the teams then. So again, you know, we do apply policies that every repo has user branches and develop branches, and then we have master branch, and we do measure in our service reviews then that to make sure everything is actually releasing from the master branch. So in terms of a policy, I guess, you know, the only one that we really have is that all production code has to release from a master branch, and then we typically have user branches develop our pre-production branches as well.
Great. We are down to 5 minutes. So we're going to take our last question or questions. So we'll go to Mary. How does Microsoft deal with developers developing faster than that documentation and operations can keep up with?
Thank you, Cindy. I actually think that's a great problem to have, you know, the developers moving faster. And so there's a few things we're trying on this. I mean, first of all, I was very passionate about how do we get capability faster to our users. In some cases, we're still using heavy UAT environments, and I wanted to, with going to the cloud, I want to be able to spin up an environment and take it back down, use what we call exposure control through flighting, where we could have a set of customers or a set of users where they get a preview of what's coming out, and maybe move things along more at that level, where rather than have these heavy, expensive UAT environments. That's not achievable in every space. For example, in finance, there's a lot of compliance around that area, so it's harder to achieve that level of velocity. And when we're doing quarter close, we don't want to be deploying any functionality that would anyway impact that. So it's there's certain guidelines depending on the function that we're actually trying to expedite. But we have a number of things that are available to us. Feature flagging is one of them that we actually go use heavily. We have this idea of promoting experimentation. And I mentioned the safe velocity idea. And so the developers, you know, we are, in terms of documentation, because that was part of the question, we would have a fair bit, like we're very agile. We sprints are every 2 weeks. But the developer and the program manager are expected to absolutely document at a very high level what is it that we're going after in that sprint. And so we would apply the rigor that any other organization would around sprint management and scrum management and that. And so, you know, even though we're moving fast, we do expect a level of documentation and code documentation. Another thing that helps that we're promoting is the APIs, use of APIs, code reuse, and that will also helps us go a little faster.
Great. I think we might have time for one more question. I'm going to give this to Martin. How much sway or influence over bugs and features do you have with the product groups? Do you get priority to ensure Microsoft runs as the smoothest business possible, or do you have to get upvoted like the rest of us?
Well, we have, I mean, we do have a little bit of an inside channel for this, but I do think, you know, it's a really good question in all seriousness, because, you know, one of the benefits CSEO has is that we are a large enterprise at the end of the day. So we have similar needs as any enterprise client out there, as a large bank or an airline that's using Microsoft products, you know, so we exercise the products. You know, we've talked a lot about Azure DevOps. You know, we built, you know, 3,500 teams, 6,000 code repos into a single project in Azure DevOps. Azure DevOps team was like, we expected people to have multiple projects. Why are you all in one project? And we were like, well, as an enterprise, this is our need. So that really allowed us to sort of stretch the product. So, you know, we do represent the enterprise all up with the product teams. So whilst we do submit features and bugs and we have to join the queue just like anyone else, we do actually expose, you know, things that would benefit the greater community and user base of Microsoft products. And sometimes we do get taken a little bit more seriously when we report these.
Great. Back to Mary to close us.
Thank you, Cindy. Wow, didn't that go fast? Thoroughly enjoyed taking your questions, and I hope that we can continue this dialogue. You can follow us on LinkedIn. That's where I will be posting our blogs and information. And also there's 2 links that I want to draw your attention to that will be also put into the chat by Ashim. And finally, please remember to complete the survey. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is a complete pleasure.